And one. Hi, and welcome to From the Research Chair. This is episode number 17. We're going to be talking about one of the things that my partner in crime there, Michael Falk, is quite expert at, as well as Brian Kozlowski, also from Focus Consulting. Brian, you're sort of the shadow invitee here, and I would welcome you to weigh in on this topic. In any case, I am Jason Voss, for those of you who don't know me, and that is
Michael Falk.
All right, so Michael, I thought we could rename this session something like Succinct Succession Planning to Provide Succor. What do you think? It's terrible, right?
A little alliteration always works for me.
All right, so for those of you not on board with the title, for those of you new to this topic, Michael, talk to us about why this isn't for the graying and balding crowd any longer.
Well, the most amazing thing about the investment and wealth management profession, which is also a bit of an Achilles heel, is it is endlessly interesting, endlessly fascinating, and requires almost zero physicality, which means you could actually do quite well at doing the job well for a really long time. That's the beauty of the profession. The Achilles heel is when you do that, it begs the question, are the people below you more junior? Okay, or do they have opportunities to grow, expand, assume more responsibility, be an heir apparent in terms of your job, your responsibilities? And what happens is when people linger too long, not because they're not adding value, but they lose talent in their firms, talent leaves, or talent is stunted. And we never know how high the ceiling may be on some of the people who are in your organization now if they're not given the room to run. So succession is for everybody because it really covers all the age groups.
So let me interject there. We have one of the most competitive of all possible businesses, investment management. I mean, I've likened it to professional sports. Michael, you'd know that better than me. And so on one hand, we ask folks to be hyper competitive, but without good succession planning, are we effectively saying, hey, all that's for naught because there is no prize at the end?
Well, that's fairly cynical. I try and avoid any cynical bone in my body. I love the skeptical bones, so let's take it from the skeptical perspective, perhaps. And it depends on how the teams work, right? The work can be a grind. Jason, when you liken it to a professional sport or anything highly competitive, it can be a grind, even if it's only cognitive. I made the comment before, there's zero physicality, but there's a cognitive drain. Right? When you work long days and it's a lot of thinking, a lot of analysis, the exhaustion you feel at the end of the day is real. This is not fiction. And it begs the question as people start to lengthen their tenure in their roles, do they still have the energy to do what they always did to be successful? I'm not saying they don't have the energy. What I'm saying is, why don't we start to shift how they expend that energy? What I can tell you, I am a former competitive athlete. The simplest way of saying that is I'm a has-been. The joy I received from playing well versus when I've coached kids and watched them play well, incomparable. For me personally, I can't say this applies to everybody. For me personally, the feeling I got from coaching a child, not my own, now my own, but in the past, not my own, who then went on to success, was so much greater than my glory days. So much greater. So what I can suggest to people who are maybe on the senior versus the junior end of the scale, you may be amazed at what you can get in terms of personal satisfaction and validation about mentoring someone, helping to raise someone up.
So let me ask, before we get too much further into this conversation, you know me, I'm a big fan of defining terms and defining contexts.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about what you think is succession, like what it is, what it isn't, right? And
Two
then
dimensions.
tangent to that. What is succession planning, and when does it begin?
There are two types of succession generally we see in our work. One is ownership, equity, if you will, and the other one is role and responsibility. So think of one being money, think of one being talent. Isn't that interesting to frame it that way? We may come back to that. In terms of timing, oh, please, people, can we think in terms of 5-year increments? Please, please, please. Equity, no. Role responsibility, 5 years. Grooming, are they ready? Training, mentoring, learning. Buy-in from everybody else because there's time to get used to it. 5 years. And when you start talking about equity, wow, sometimes we have to at least raise the question to people. You've built a really valuable firm. You know what that means? It's expensive. The equity is expensive, valuable. So 2 thoughts on that. Number 1, the longer you wait to begin selling down equity, the more difficult it becomes to ever sell down equity and keep the firm in the family, so to say, even if it's not family. So timing, I like to state 5 years and say, let's think in terms of those types of increments to give us enough runway to get the jobs done.
I'm going to interrupt you just for a second there. What do you mean by 5 years? What's T0? What's T5 in years?
Well, T0 should be, think about it for every role and responsibility in your organization. Is there a growth or development plan for them for the next 5 years? And it starts now, T0, for the next 5 years. And that could shift and change over the subsequent 5 years. But think about it as a 5-year plan. And if you say, Michael, I want to make that a 3 or a 4-year plan, have at it. That doesn't offend me. Not troubled by that. For equity, right? Until the organization has some level of stability of a going concern, has an actual structured strategic plan, so that when somebody's buying the equity, they know what the future path looks like, right? They don't necessarily know where the ending of the path is, but they know what the path looks like. So they have comfort in buying in. There's clarity on where the business is headed. If the business isn't somewhat of a going concern, I hope the audience recognizes that Gen X and Gen Y, more so than, Gen Z and Gen Y, more so than Gen X, are not huge fans of buying equity. And in the financial planning industry, this is really interesting. They suggest try to avoid linking your human capital with your investment capital. So where you work and where you invest, the financial planning world thinks you need to diversify those so you don't get a critical error at some point in time. We also know, though, this is the carrot. The wealthiest people leveraged both in the exact same place, right? So the financial planning industry says, don't do this. And yet we look to some of the richest people ever to walk the face of the earth, and they did exactly this. People, yes, but just understand, they are the unique. They are the outliers. That's not normal. The financial planning profession has it more right.
So the succession plan, just to summarize before we move on, the succession plan in your mind is specified. Well, first of all, there's gating criteria. The firm has to be a going concern. 2, it has to be a document, and it's an agreement between the talent that we would like to develop and the firm. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, next question.
If it's all in, sometimes we get asked to do just equity instead of equity and talent.
Yeah. So then isn't there also a case to be made that we're not necessarily talking about who ends up owning the firm at the end of the day? We're also talking about development plans in general. So for example, if I'm a CIO of a equity part of the business, and there are also CIOs of, say, fixed income or some other asset class or whatever, however the firm is organized, isn't it also relevant to do intra succession planning within those teams?
Without a doubt, the analysts, many analysts want to become PMs, many PMs want to become CIOs. Do they understand what the skill differentials are to make those elevations? That's important. That's part of a development plan, right? Understand some analysts, and this is, I can't tell you how many teams I have a conversation around this topic on. Some analysts just love being analysts. They don't want to be a PM. They don't want to rise to a CIO. But when they've been doing the job beautifully for 10, 15, 20 years, they're like, wait a minute. If I don't reach for PM or CIO, I can't ever really get a boost in my compensation. The ugly truth, sometimes money comes into this. I'm sorry, but that's reality. All right, let's get past that. I think sufficiently sized teams should have a director of research, DOR. Think of this individual as the head of all analysts. And I think the DOR should have a commensurate level of compensation with the CIO. Very different role. Think DOR inward facing, think CIO outward facing. Both of the professionals are the keepers of the philosophy and the processes, but in different ways.
So next question. You mentioned, 5 years. Okay, so we've got a time horizon on there. What are the qualitative concerns in the succession plan? So for example, I'm guessing this document that we're talking about, the succession plan, little s, little p, big S, big P would be take over the firm. I'm taking it. So little s, little p, is it really about time, Michael, or is it really about satisfying qualitative criteria like, person demonstrates following skill set with mastery level, or something like that? Is that a part of the plan too, these qualitative elements, or is it just, hey, you hang out for 5 years and if you don't suck, we give you some share? I know the answer, but if ever there were a T-ball set up for the baseball player.
We have an ugly heuristic in the world. We think experience and time are exactly aligned at all times. This is a horrible heuristic.
Totally agree. Remind me to say something at the end. You keep going. I have to say something about this, though.
So the 5 years is simply a guidepost, because if we don't have 5 years, we don't have an actual plan that we can put on paper. The plan may be solved in 2 years, right? If you've got an unbelievably high performer. But keep in mind, these people have day jobs, right? This is day job plus. So, and again, if you want to shorten the 5, it's a guidepost. They may beat it, they may not. So Jason, qualitative, yes, it has to be. Mastery of different skills. And can I just say, for the record, for our wonderful audience, and by the way, anybody who shows up and listens to Jason and I consider wonderful. Focus Consulting has a phrase: IQ gets you in the door, EQ gets you to a higher floor. So much of the mastery, the IQ stuff, the talented people on your teams, they can handle this and they can digest it. They can do this in self-study quite often. The EQ takes a little more work. The interpersonal skills, the shorthand, right? How you work with others. Because if you're going to be the leader of a team and you're going to maximize the talent of that team, this isn't about securities that have no emotions. This is about the soft things called human beings that actually come with emotions of various types, various peaks and valleys, And you need to be able to work with those individuals to maximize their output and your team's output.
So the comment I was going to make about qualitative concerns, and especially the experience thing, is for those of you who don't know me, and there are quite a few new faces to me on our podcast today, I have said for years, in relation to behavioral finance, as well as in addition to creativity and all kinds of different technologies on the soft side of things, that people frequently think that the way you do intuition is you have to have experience with something, but experience is also the source of all of our behavioral biases. So it is a necessary condition, but nowhere near sufficient. It's really about wisdom. And so, Michael, you're really speaking to this topic here.
Well, and let's touch on experience in a lightning rod type of topic in investment markets these days, cryptocurrencies, right? If you're above a certain age, most likely you have a negative view. If you are below a certain age, most likely you have a positive view. None of us really knows where this is headed, although I have views. But if we just use that as an example, experience is either limiting the people above a certain age or and not limiting those of a younger age. Are we at least open to the possibilities that people who see things differently may today see things a little bit better? Experience clouds that topic. Or let me recant that. Experience can cloud that topic. It's not a rule, but it's a real possibility.
Okay, so next question, and this is for those of you on the call. I'm trying to follow as closely as possible. We tend to range free and wide on our podcast. I'm trying to stick to the outline today as closely as possible. We've hit on a couple different types: equity and talent. Are there other types to add in here, Michael, or did we cover it?
I think that's sufficient.
Okay, cool.
We can get more detail, but I think that's sufficient, Jason. Equity versus talent.
Well, ideally, we tease these folks enough that they actually pick up the
you know where they meet, though? They combine. They meet at leadership.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah.
So equity and talent meet at leadership, because that's where voting rights or decision rights, more specifically, often come in terms of the future direction of the firm. So
next question. I'm guessing the answer is going to be both. What is better, to involve talent in their own development plan, or to tell them what your expectations are, or some combination therein, i.e. both?
It has to be both. It has to be both. If you don't ask people what they wish to learn, let's just start there. What do you want to learn? What do you want to get better at? Because if they have an answer for that, you know where their passion is headed. Leverage the passion. Don't put them into a box, right? I know analysts who, for all intents and purposes, had CIO type of qualities, but they weren't really good at analyzing individual securities. You know what they became? Great portfolio specialists. Outstanding portfolio specialists. So let's get into the talent you have and leverage that up. And if you discover you have gaps, well, now you know what you're looking to hire.
All right. So now we're switching topics.
Sorry, I drifted into talent.
No, dude, it's the subject of the day. No talent, no succession. It's that simple.
Or no talent, dead end succession.
Well, sure. Yeah. Well, there's no succession. There's just.
Right. I just want to be a little more critical.
Yeah. So we haven't really hit on it. It's been tangent. It's been implicit. Why is all this important? Why do we care?
Well, I can tell you there are some boutique firms that actually don't care. And let me explain what I mean by that. Is they don't care if they have succession. The leadership thinks, listen, when we're close to wanting to retire, we're going to give the clients their money back and sail off into the sunset. And now the only flaw in that is if they've got juniors on the team, those juniors all need to get new jobs. That's a flaw. But we can't argue it's wrong right? Now, for those firms that want to carry on, maybe build a legacy, I have an appreciation for firms that go this direction. I have to share my bias. Then it's not about simply transversing from G1, the founders, to generation 2, G2. You have to have a structure, a plan, an approach in place that can go from 2 to 3, 3 to 4. If you can build a plan that goes from 1 to 3, you're good. This is going to be as close to an evergreen plan as you can form. When we are retained to do this work, and wow, this is a popular topic for us these days. I think it's a combination of the age of founders. They're roughly in their 60 plus age range now because of when a lot of these successful firms were born, and COVID and challenges of the markets these days, the industry. More people are thinking, maybe I'll just walk away. Okay. It's not good or bad. It just is. What we need to build is, we're not just looking to get you out. We're looking to help you step away, and it could be a plural you, help you step away, but the firm can continue on. Because if you build it to go from 1 to 2, I can virtually guarantee you this thing's going to break apart, and there's no legacy here after 2.
Alexander C. Genghis.
Yeah. So what we build, or we attempt to build and share with our clients, is 1 to 3, because we want it to be ongoing. The biggest challenge these days we find is the bid-ask spread. Oh my. Part of the reason I enjoy succession work is because, first of all, I think it's really important. But there is no level of anything I do that has the level of emotionality that I get to experience from both sides. The attitudes of the founders versus the attitudes of their potential buyers. Right? Let's just talk about the principle of making a market. You can't sell down if you don't have any buyers. To which some founders say, well, I'll just go get private equity. I said, okay, just understand a rule of that. There's a rule. Everybody write this rule down. This is important. Okay. If you go get private equity to be your successor, you are going to massively damage your price and you will lose your firm. In fact, you've lost decision rights, because private equity is not going to give you money to walk away. Private equity is going to give you money for the next generation to continue to run the firm the way that it has been successful. If they don't want to do that, they don't like the private equity, they don't like the master, you lose decision rights when you go get private equity. You need to build your market by the people that you raise up underneath. Think about as making a pre-sale. Now we're kind of in the options world, right? So my job often is to collapse the bid-ask spread. What the founders are asking and what the future leadership is bidding. My job is to bring those two numbers together so that I can enable equity succession. And it's fascinating work.
So I'm going to say something. You're talking about how do we get folks vested before they're invested, and separate conversation, and maybe for another one of our From the Research Chair podcasts, is talent development, because it's the obvious hand-in-hand partner to this entire discussion.
It really is. Yes.
Yeah, we'll table that for another podcast. So what elements, without giving away the store, you and Brian need to make money as consultants, and hopefully all these folks are, intrigued enough to reach out to do so. What high-level good tips can we pass on without giving away too much, Michael, that we haven't hit?
I'll give two. Number one, you want people to buy the equity. You don't want to give it away. You need them to be invested. Okay. This is why the bid-ask spread is so important. The second one is clarity on the rules around equity. And I'm going to give you one. So that's not the second. So How does someone become eligible? How does someone have the opportunity to buy? How does someone buy it? How does someone, when and if enable to sell it? Rules, right? If we're going to hopefully create some sort of a market, we need rules on how the market's going to operate. So we build the complete set of rules bespoke to the organization as they're interested in. But the key thing I may have said to you that you didn't pick up on, eligibility and opportunity. I want to take us to an amusement park right now. Because,
Which one? Six Flags, Cedar Point?
Sure. You have to be this tall to get on this ride. So you are eligible to get on the ride. That doesn't mean you're getting on that roller coaster, though, does it? Some people may not want to get on. Now, in this case, we like a 2-tier. We recommend a 2-tier. Eligibility is clear, so nobody has to ask, hey, when might I be? They know, but they have to be invited. There has to be a group, a committee, if you will, that decides who deserves to become part of the ownership group, right? Because you want people who fit the culture, people who represent the culture, people who perpetuate the culture, and they have the skills in whatever role they do. And please, please, please don't make sure all of your owners are on the investment team, but they're not from sales or not for operations. I'm not saying every single person in the organization should have access, but if you don't share an appreciation from that club across the different basic tribes of the organization, investment, operations, and sales, that's not good. That will perpetuate something that could cause problems down the road.
So I had asked earlier, Michael, why is this important? We didn't touch on, but it's so obvious. If you don't do this well, what happens?
Talent
or you
leaves.
don't do it at all. Or you don't do it at all.
Yeah, talent leaves. And by the way, it's not your low-level talent that leaves. It's your good talent that leaves. You get to keep the ones you really don't want, and you lose the ones you want. People, do you recognize this is a bad plan? All right. Talent leaves. Clients end up leaving more and more. If you have to fill out an RFP, and I'm so sorry for you, to get business, they want to know your succession plan. And if you don't have one that they feel is good, what they know is all the work that it goes into doing due diligence on you and hiring you, it's going to blow up sooner or later because you don't have succession. So keep your good talent, get more business, and keep that train running efficiently on the track. You've built a good business. Why not keep it going?
Okay, my favorite subject of the day. Ergo, the ego. We haven't hit on ego yet. Let's talk about some of those personalities, those founder types, typically investor types. Is this a trip to the dentist? Is this what is this typically for them? How do they respond to this whole thing? How do you help? How do you and Brian help with this bit?
We take a small pair of calipers.
I knew you were going to head here. I know you well enough.
We go in through the ear and then we pull the ego out. No. Listen, we don't. Ego is largely a part of this, some way, somehow. And not always in the way that you would predict, but it's a part of this usually. And what we have to do is we have to help people see differently. I'll give you one example. Real life, a couple of years back, trying to collapse the bid-ask spread. And one of the people that were part of G2, we're going G2 to G3. One of the people in G2 was, I'll just say he was 60 plus. And he's like, why would I sell at that level? And Jason, I have to pause. I have to actually do something in my house. I'm going to turn off my mic and my video, and I will be back in about 1 minute.
No problem. I had wanted to turn it over to Brian for a second in any case. Brian, So this is perfect timing. I literally had just typed to Brian via chat. Hey, Brian, may I call on you? Brian, you also
Sure,
engaged
may.
in this. You also engaged in this work quite a bit. What have we left out of the discussion regarding the points so far covered?
Now, the one thing I want to just emphasize on Michael, which he was talking about the transparency, and when I think through our rewards or the equity succession work, and the problem we often see is when they're, so we do our rewards work, we have three principles: fair, transparent, and simple. So I'll focus on the transparent one for a second, specifically on the equity point. That's where the biggest issues come, where we dig in and find there were just misaligned expectations. I thought I was going to be able to buy equity. No, you can't. And what winds up happening is that builds over time. It's fine if someone doesn't qualify, just be clear with them that they don't qualify. And, really, I can't emphasize what Michael said enough, laying out the groundwork, laying out the understanding between there's a clear differentiation between opportunity to purchase and the actual purchase itself.
Eligibility.
Eligibility, yes.
Yeah. So let me finish the story. So the older G2er on this team, looking directly in the eyes of a G3er, said, why would I sell at that price? As this conversation was towards the end of my work, I finally brought the two generations together into the same room. It's quite fun. Anyway, and I stopped the G2er and I said, let me ask you a question, simple question. And I knew the answer. Like a good lawyer, you don't ask a question unless you know the answer in advance. I'm not a lawyer, by the way. I said, I used his name. I will not use his name here. I said, now, we've had some wonderful dialogue, you and I. And I don't think the difference in price will make spit bit of difference in your future lifestyle. Am I correct? He said, Michael, you are correct. I said, that's why you sell at that price. Because the firm gets to continue and everybody in a good negotiation feels they got a little less than they wanted. You get a little less, they paid a little bit more, but everybody walks away saying, we got a deal done. This is a firm that has a 50-year track record. I'd love to see it go another 50 years. How about that?
So our final question, and I'm gonna couch it with an or, and Brian, feel free to weigh in here too. And you've just sort of hit on one such example: nightmare or dream. Talk to us, if you can, high level, a couple anecdotes about nightmares that have occurred in this arena, and then the dream outcome, which I know you both well enough, and I've talked to both of you over time enough to know that there are firms in both of these categories.
I'll give you an example of each. How about that?
Perfect.
Nightmare. One of the G1s had been retired for 8 years, but never left. I was brought in, Focus was brought in, and this man had he built a really successful organization. There were two principal founders. We'll say easy, good one, and hard, not so good one. And he unequivocally looked me in the eye and said, Michael, I am going to get paid for every share that I have ever created. Every share I own, I'm going to get paid market value for those shares. The other owner, by the way, was giving away a third of his shares to people he handpicked as the next generation of leaders. He was selling the rest, but he was giving away a third because he recognized the money won't make a difference to him, and the price was quite heavy. So this enabled the transition. So we had nightmare and dream in the same, but I'll give you the better dream. Different firm, came up with a number from the founder. All of the G2ers said it's too low. The G2ers all said they had such an appreciation and respect for the founder. Said it's too low, we want to pay more. And I said, I love that expression, but maybe not. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it, because you don't want to make it more difficult than for G3, right? This was unbelievable. You want to talk about a firm that is tight and performing well? Wow. Because it came through the culture. There's my nightmare and my dream.
Brian, do you have your own nightmare and dream that you want to share?
I'll go nightmare first. And this more on the transparency piece. Firm, they provided equity to individuals across the firm without any rhyme or reason. So one year you get X allocation, next year you might not. And there was
this is a very successful firm too. Can we add that?
Yes, very successful firm. You get some, you don't get some, you can't plan. You don't necessarily know why you're getting it. So there are two problems with that. First of which is the extrinsic piece of being able to financially plan for the purchase. So that's a major issue because you can't align your personal financials, but you're also losing the intrinsic piece of it. There's a prestige of being able to get the equity or have the eligibility to have the equity and then be offered the opportunity to be able to do it. And it's lost because I don't know why I'm getting it. Is it because I performed? Is it because I cleaned someone's car? Is it because I did something else? So from the transparency piece, it caused a lot of issues because people just didn't understand why and why one year and not another. So,
Brian, I'm going to say in my own experience as a PM, folks may or may not know who I worked for. That was absolutely an issue. Award given, thank you. Why am I being given this? What are the expectations that comes with this? Are there additional responsibilities not communicated? All it did was create mystery. And are they trying to tell me I need a new car? Anyway, keep going. Sorry.
So there's misalignment and a nightmare situation on many different levels there, and it's a lot of communication. The dream scenario is one where client lays out a very clear framework for the roles that qualify and the criteria that would allow you to earn it, and they're very transparent on a year-to-year basis on how that process works. And what they also do is, if you're in a role where that doesn't currently qualify, there's a plan to help you understand how you get there. So it's a very transparent piece from the very first day you walk in to when you're the most senior person on the team, how you get to where you got to, why you got what you got, and ultimately what your eligibility and opportunity is. And from a transparency piece, for me, especially in my rewards work, that is absolute dream.
Thank you, gentlemen, both. So I'm going to turn over to questions now from the audience, recognizing that you may not necessarily want to disclose at your individual firms what's happening. If you would like to use the chat function, chat me directly your questions, feel free. If, on the other hand, you're comfortable with the public format or form of a question, feel free to take yourself off the mute and speak your question out. And BK and MF, it's over to you. I'll just be moderator.
Audience participation time. Come on. What questions or curiosity?
Well, I'll go first. We've been in succession planning for about 3 years. 32-year-old firm. G2 is my son, and he should have started the business. He's so good. He says, Mom and Dad, you started your planning about 20 years too late. And he's right. And he said he started his planning about 10 years too late. But the long and the short of it is, it's going very well. He has heard from his study group that if both the seller and the buyer both feel like they're getting a little bit screwed, then they probably got a great deal.
Yeah, it's a good negotiation. Everybody leaves a little bit unhappy.
Yep.
Not screwed, Jonathan, just a little bit unhappy.
Well, a little bit unhappy, but
Jonathan, you've given hope, though. If you were 20 years too late and your son is 10 years too late, that means his son should be right about on time for this planning.
You're exactly right. Actually, his daughter.
I was going to say son or daughter, Michael. Geez, it's 2021.
I'm going to get banned. I'm sorry.
His 13-year-old daughter, who has a portfolio, and according to Fidelity Retirement Center, she will be able to retire before he can.
Perfect.
Well, isn't that why we have kids? Isn't it to support us in our older ages?
Yeah.
No, we're not going there. Thank you, Jonathan. Other questions or comments or thoughts you want to share? Curiosities.
I'll speak up as Van's sitting. I'm actually in Europe. I haven't listened to you guys much before. I'm joining because actually, for my sins, I went to high school with Jim Ware and saw him at a reunion a few years ago. So he invites me to these things. And so I saw him at a reunion a few years ago. So he and I knew each other way back.
We may need to have a separate conversation, Van.
We need,
I need other kind of help for that. But, you said don't give it away. They should buy it, should succession. And the problem is, you run a successful business, gets to a certain level, and I don't know how the next generation comes up with the capital, the wherewithal to have enough. And so that's why there's so many big deals being done with Dial and all these other things to say, okay, I'm going to go outside because there's just not enough money within these people, even if they've been successful, to really buy these things at anything meaningful level. So generation one of the founders, really to get value, don't have an alternative really than to go to outside private equity, which
there's a couple
rather than to the thing. So there's in-betweens, but you got the gist of mine.
Yeah. So this is where the 5-year planning really looks better at 10, and where people can use their bonuses over 10 years. That defers a lot of the cost. And now we start talking about internal sales versus an external sale. So let me explain what I mean by that. An external sale, you're looking to top tick, right? What are we getting from the market if we're going IPO or private equity, as an example, okay? But internal sale, you're not trying to top tick. You're trying to extend the privacy of the organization. And so when you think about that, if it would sell for 1 EBITDA multiple externally, it really should sell for a lower EBITDA multiple internally. And when you get into the research, the accounting and valuation research, they get into numbers like 20 to 40% for discounts for a lack of marketability or a lack of control. So
0.6 is usually what I see, like a 40% haircut.
Yeah. So Van, what I can tell you is you chop 30% off the value and you allow them to purchase it over 10 years, you can start to collapse the spread. I'm not saying you're going to get there all the way all the time, but then if you can't, then it raises the question, why did you wait so long? Right now, we can't undo the past. Let's be candid. But so then if we can acknowledge that that topic comes up, then we can ask one more question. And that question is, if I get $5 instead of $3, does it matter to me and my family long term? And then you satisfy the spread. Possibly. So it just leads us to that question because, Van, we see this. You're not talking about an outlier.
No, this is everywhere.
Yeah.
So I've got a question for you guys, and I don't want to front run anybody else's question.
We did get one more question.
Oh, hold on.
In chat.
Yeah, okay, we'll do the chat first. That's way more important. That's interesting. I have chat open. You must have gotten it directly, Michael, because it's not in the...
Oh, well, now I got to click a button. Geez, I thought I was just supposed to be a talking head.
So while you do that, my question is, what do you do if this plan is set in motion and then the firm starts to decline, which is also something we're seeing more and more of? And I know you and I think Brian too, we've all had this conversation. We think the industry is likely to consolidate and shrink, and the survivors will be the best at active management. And what are the nuances and wrinkles there? How do we handle that situation where I bought in, but it's worth less in the end?
Well, this is one of the greatest topics that comes up from some of the G+, whoever the next generation is, G+, that we get from them is, wait a minute, they've had a 30 or 40-year run that was just beautiful. I don't see that happening again over the next 30 to 40 years. Or, plug in whatever numbers you want, all right? So what we need to normalize that expectation based upon the risk at this point in time. So we work to try and do that, but it's one thing to do it, and it's one thing to get G minus to buy into it, right? G minus has to acknowledge, yeah, I went from 0 to 50 billion during a 30-year declining interest rate environment where liberal democracy was growing in the world. Now, we have to have a dialogue. It's an important topic. This is why I said earlier on the podcast, the strategic plan comes into play here. Is there one? Does G Plus know it? Have they been involved in creating it? Hint, hint. That helps a lot. I'm happy to get to the question because we kind of touched on it a little bit, and it was a DM. I'm not going to mention who sent it since it was a DM, but if they want to cop to it when I'm done trying to respond. On talent succession planning, how do you balance thinking 5+ years and telling the next gen that they have been identified without making them feel like they will be stuck in a 5-year holding period, at least waiting for the existing PM to retire? First of all, thank you for the question. I think I touched on it a little bit just now with what I said to Jason and what we said. It's a 5-year development plan. They can accelerate it. And you can say, listen, we're thinking 5 years. That doesn't mean 5 years, right? As Jason likes to say, there's no such thing as a future fact, right? To say this is going to happen 5 years, no. So number one, what we're going to be doing is giving credit. Listen, you're a high performer. We think you're a high performer. We want to give you this opportunity. And the development plan is an opportunity. Let's see what you do with it. There's no guarantees, but can we just ask, the end of your question was waiting for the existing PM to retire, right? The PM needs to start thinking about how they are training, developing these other people to take over their job or become co-PMs. It doesn't have to be about retirement. It can be about sharing the decision rights. I hope that helps answer the question.
Yeah, Michael, I'll add here that I was co-PM for the Davis Appreciation Income Fund. When I was first approached with the development plan, I was shocked. I didn't think I was ready to be a PM, and I said as much. And I said, I have in mind skill set that I would like to acquire. So the point here, first point, a dialogue with the talent is really important. They may not feel ready. And frankly, I was terrified. I was like, holy cow, I think I'm having a hard enough time aiming this pistol. I'm not sure I'm ready to pull the trigger and take responsibility for what lies on the other side of the pistol. That's the first thing. The second thing was there was definitely an easing of decision rights even prior to promotion. And the promotion was to co-PM. And then so I would say I was an analyst that had decision rights, and my decisions were not really questioned, but there was veto power. Then once promoted, was promoted to co-PM and shared responsibilities. And by the time I retired, exclusive decision rights. And my co-PM was only there because it was a family organization and there were no decisions being made by him. And so there was a slow winding there, and they had made me a partner of the firm. And so anyway, the point is there are lots of steps between analyst and even portfolio manager.
Yeah, and Jason, you highlighted saying I think it's really important to respond to the person who asked the question, to repeat the changing or evolution of the decision rights. So we're talking about one thing on a team to have a voice versus having a vote. Decision rights are a vote. A voice is less. So we're graduating over time. How do we allow different or greater votes versus just voice? And I hope I have not too strongly fixated on 5 years. We just want some directionality. And we want to manage the expectation of if you're going to develop and do this work well to get ready, it's going to take a few years. And because there's a lot involved, and respectfully, you have a day job and you may have a young family at home too. So we're not trying to. And if you want to accelerate. And then you should get more decision rights as earned.
So we'll pull one time for final questions, and if not, we'll do the end credits, so to speak. Any additional questions?
I'll take that as a no.
I
So,
hope this has been helpful for people.
Yeah, it's been very helpful.
oh, wonderful. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
So thank you all for joining us. Our next podcast, we do these every other Thursday, always at 11 Central, noon Eastern. Van, I'm not sure where in Europe you are, so I can't do your time zone.
France at the moment. But anyway.
So T plus or G plus one. So I think that's 6 hours ahead of my Florida time. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Topic is undisclosed at this point. We haven't determined what it is, but it'll be the 18th of March at noon Eastern. Thanks everybody for your participation.
Thank you.
Bye,
Say hi
all.
to Jim Ware.
Bye everyone.
Will do.
Tell him to grow up. Tell him to grow up.
Bye everyone.